Hi guys, I'm speaking today to Demanti O'Brien, a collector from Atlanta. Demanti, welcome.
Hello, how are y'all?
Doing great. I'm so excited to talk to you. I know you've been so busy giving tours in your amazing collection. I mean, I guess how long you've been giving tours for now?
So I've been giving tours since 2022. I would usually do them every day in July. But after 2023, I was like, okay, I'll just do it around the major art parts of Atlanta. So Art Week, and Juneteenth is a big art thing here. Articulate's a big art thing here. So really maneuvering around the Atlanta art events to do it while people may be visiting.
That's so great. That's so great. I really love what you're doing for the community. Before we dive into that, I just wanted you to tell a little bit about how you got into art. I know we discussed it a little bit in our prior conversations. I know you're in fashion business, you're a scout and manage a model agency, and you recently had a feature in Cultured magazine. So, how many years have you been collecting?
I've been collecting art from the secondary market. It's going on 4 years. From the primary market, it is a little over 3 years.
Mhm.
So, my first piece through auction was Woodrow Nash, and my first acquisition through primary sales was Richard Mensa, which is based in London.
Oh, great. Yeah, so I mean, it's still pretty new to collecting, and I love that you really dove in and you're so passionate, helping people, connecting people, and also giving tours. I think that's also rare. Some people collect forever, they never kind of share their collection. Tell me a little bit about what was that seed that was planted? Where did you catch the virus for collecting? Who was it that made you?
Um,
Was that
I think it
initial?
was immediate after that auction.
Mhm.
Um, Having certain pieces in a home, almost for me at least, I'm a maximalist, so it really demanded that other pieces be also bought. So my first year, I planned to buy from two artists, support two artists, and that was supposed to be like, okay, I'm doing a good thing. I'm entering into the space. I think the first year was like 60, 60 artists, something crazy.
Wow.
Um, and then over this course of 3.5, 4 years, it's come to be over 400 pieces, both sculpture and painting.
That's amazing. 400 pieces. And I know you like to buy your artworks and art pieces while you travel. You told me that there are certain cultures that really spoke to you. I know Brazil has a special place in your heart. What other places have you traveled to and collected from?
Almost every place I can, if I see something that moves me, like I've collected in Cote d'Ivoire, I've collected in South Africa and Brazil are my favorites.
Okay.
But I've also bought works while I was in Cuba. Um, if I can't buy artwork, I'm gonna buy maybe clothing or something that really has a artistry or artisan's hands at work. So jewelry or clothing where I can have a piece of that place. But as far as visual arts from the painting, sculpture, South Africa and Brazil have my heart when it comes to that.
That's cool. I love art from Brazil as well. I haven't yet been to South Africa, but I know it's also quite amazing.
Hmm.
Yeah, really so special. That's so great. I love when people combine the passion, with education, because I do believe that, traveling, this is really a form of education for all of us. So it's great that you invest and bring, home these wonderful things that you can share with your community. I want to talk to you about, I think what's unique about you, that how you went about um, really making an effort of sharing, your passion with your community. I know Atlanta, collecting scene is, distinctive. It's younger compared to places like New York or, Miami or LA. And I know that you're really making an impact with what you're doing. Um, what was, I mean, you said you were giving tours for 2 years already. So what brought you to this idea? Did someone ask you to show you home? I mean, because some people are not very
Um,
comfortable, like showing, their
yeah.
living space.
So, prior to me probably opening my home, I went to pick up a sculpture from an artist in Detroit,
Uh-huh.
um, Au- Austin Brantley, and he reached out to collectors of his and asked could I come to their home to see their collection, also to see some works. I think they bought a work from each show that he's ever had. Like they'd buy a work. So he wanted me to see, I guess, a multiple pieces of his in somebody's home. But the Whitakers in Detroit was my first, I think, home as far as seeing collectors. And as far as seeing African artifacts, I went to Eric Edwards' home in Brooklyn.
Hmm.
So aside from that, I hadn't been in any home of art or anything. Um, so it became normalized when I met and heard about in Chicago, there's a collectors group called Diasporal Rhythms, and two of them were visiting for the Black Art in America's grand opening. It was Juneteenth of 2022, and they were telling how normal it was, and even in Atlanta at some point in time, not necessarily now, it was normal for collectors to open their home to discuss artists they were collecting, to let artists to showcase their work even. Um, so once I heard those different stories, also became having more of a personal relationship with the artist, I thought it would be one for good for the community, but also good for the artists themselves to get new eyes on them.
Hmm.
Also keeps my information on the piece and on the artist refreshed when I have to do
Correct.
these
Yeah.
tours.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you invite the artist also for these tours, the artists who are in your collection, or you just giving the tour yourself to your audience?
So I've invited artists of the Atlanta community. Well, of course, if artists are traveling or visiting and they want to
Sure.
see it, or
Hmm.
even dropping off a piece, I'm like, yeah, I'll do it.
Let's do
But
the tour.
yes,
That's great.
but not every artist that's even in Atlanta has seen the collection.
Uh-huh.
Um, I'm not going to ask why, but a lot of artists that have seen the collection have not been in the collection. So a lot of Atlanta artists, they're just curious
Mhm.
of on what it is because a lot of them have not been in collectors' homes unless they're again dropping off a piece or installing a piece. Um, they have not seen. And then also when it comes to Atlanta collectors, the homes that maybe they have seen have the same maybe artists that are well collected in the Atlanta community. Whereas I'm kind of forging what I believe to be my own path as far as where who I'm meeting, where I am, and that letting that kind of resonate and lead me when it comes to my buying.
Yeah, that's so exciting. I love that. I love that you're engaging the artist, and I'm sure the artists that you have not collected, they're checking out your collection. That they're like, well, we have to see it. So I think that's great. It's like a kind of the full circle, people go,
Mhm.
and I love how innovative it is. I mean, historically, of course, I love the examples like the Phillips collection in DC, historic collection where the Phillips family was opening on Thursday their music room and inviting the neighborhood in, coming and visit, and they did the music evenings, and it still continues that tradition. I think that
Mhm.
to me really resonates because I love that richness of the spirit. I think your generosity, of sharing. I think that's really beautiful. Yeah, and I wanted to ask you, I mean, so you mentioned Chicago and the group of the collectors who gave you this idea. I think my that's where I first saw most significant collection of Black art. I think
Mhm.
it was about, I think 2011, I went to Expo Chicago and I was doing with the fair private collection visits. And I remember this incredible collection. Um, where my mind was blown because no one yet was collecting black art, and it was well integrated. It was not only black artists, but it was like along the names of Richard Prince and Tucci, like really really great, like amazing. So it was really David Hammonds, like really incredible artists. So Chicago is definitely has as a city, I mean, very unique and strong collecting history, because their collectors have been collecting with the help of curators of the institutions. Um, Unlike like cities like New York, where people used advisors for a long time, or London, So I think what's interesting to me hearing what are the trends in Atlanta. What do you hear? Like, do people use curators, advisors? What are the trends from other friends?
Um, I can't speak to everybody in Atlanta. I know that some use advisors, or some have trusted gallerists,
Okay.
as their advisor.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I will say that a lot of maybe people have the same affinity for an artist in the community. Um, like there are people that are very, um, I guess, well spoken for, and also pillars of the Atlanta community, like um Fahamu, um, which has started the Adama Museum, the African Diaspora Museum of Atlanta. There will be a lot of people that have known Fahamu for years, and they have that personal relationship also with him.
Mm-hmm.
But me coming in, like I'm coming from a different perspective because I did not, I guess, matriculate with the same people and the same artists that they did. Whereas now I'm seeing artists that are in the upcoming lane, they're in their 20s, or early 30s, and they're also looking for their collector base. Um, and they have not necessarily solidified it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas some people I really love and I've collected multiple pieces from,
Mm-hmm.
um, it may not be that the group of the collectors that I know may not be their collector group. And I'm always about inspiring the next generation because I believe there's way more artists than there are collectors. So,
Yeah,
um,
100%. Yeah.
inspiring the next generation to kind of support the
Yeah.
rest of the artists.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. That's really, really interesting. And I know you've been also in and out of the High Museum all this week. We've been trying to coordinate. Yeah. How important is museum support, museum groups to you? Can you talk a little bit about that? Like how that brings community together for you?
I'm really happy to see that the High recently opened Tyler Mitchell's exhibition, considering he's from Atlanta. And he's very young, a very young artist, very young photographer. So I think this is a step in the right direction. I would like to also see maybe some more incorporation of the Atlanta artists or people that stem from Atlanta
Mm-hmm.
into the highest exhibitions ongoing, not necessarily once and then it's fizzled
Yeah.
out.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas where I visit Baltimore or Chicago,
Mm-hmm.
they make sure to champion at all
Local
times the
artists.
people from their community, past and present.
Yeah.
Um, and there's a lot of, while hoping the High, I'm not very familiar with the High's activity when it comes to the youth and the education, but I know just from me being present in art museums where classes were going to the Baltimore or Detroit Museum, they were sitting, they were drawing, they were actually interacting with the work. I have not seen that with my own eyes from the High, not to say it's not being done, but I just know how normalized in communities where you can see it pretty much weekly because it's just ingrained where we are cultivating the next imaginative minds. Um, but I am very appreciative to see the Tyler Mitchell show at the High and to see hopefully some potential other shows in the near future of Atlanta artists.
That's
Um,
great. Are you part
mhm.
of any museum groups, like collector groups or circles in the museum or?
I only have the membership, but I know some people involved with the museum and on the higher end of things.
Well, that's how
Um,
you
I,
start. I mean, you can always
yes,
go
I'm a member.
it can always go up. That's wonderful that you're supporting at that level, because a lot of collectors, I mean, trying to be very strategic. They kind of put a little too much effort, I feel, sometimes into joining the right circle, and it becomes this kind of social status game. So I have a lot of respect for you, just being a member, just supporting this, and I think it comes with a lot of heart. I mean, considering all the other work you're doing, because when people, I think, we're all aware the art world can be like those Olympics of the ego, in some departments when people become a
Hmm.
little bit, it's kind of, to me, overpowers the message. It's good when it goes along the way and it's
Yes.
organic, like in your case, you're doing your work in your home, you're sharing with people, you're supporting the artist, and yet you're very humble in a sense, like you just want more participation and more people to come. I love that. I think that's very valuable. um, when I see, and there are collectors I meet, who are very much focused on the opposite route, I think it can be also quite discouraging, especially to the artists, because then the artists understand that they're only accessory to to certain kind of collector positioning. So I'm being very mindful about this also when I work with people, and that's why in my Malibu Art Collectors Club I talk about intentional collecting, because
Hmm.
what are we bringing forward? I mean, it becomes a vocation. You are an educator. How is the positioning of the collector? Because you put yourself in the situation where you tell your own story. Museums collect, and they have policies, they have leadership. Their role is to do it for a general public. As a collector, you have this unique power to tell your own story the way you want to tell it. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be complicated, but it can be shared in very generous, kind ways that is just as empowering, because you're making it very accessible. That's what I love about it. That's really, really cool. Yeah. And I'm curious, like, was it helpful for you, the publication of the Cultured magazine, which now has become like a really well-read, publications largely between New York and LA, and I guess Atlanta as well. Um, did you get like a lot of interest from this coming to you? Did a lot of people reach out?
So, I do have other outlets that have reached out,
Uh-huh.
um, as well as maybe wanting me to be included in some community panels or discussions, things like that. Um, Fortunately, I mean, a lot of my tour dates were already reserved prior to the article, which I also appreciate because I know the people are coming for the right reason. Other than, if I don't know you and you just like, hey, I just saw your article, I want to come. That I'm okay with that. But if you've known me and you just didn't care because, like you said, the steam or
Mhm.
the social climb aspect wasn't
Yes.
there, I mean, I would rather not. But,
I hear you.
it's definitely worked for all for the good. Just to put even some artists that has names have never been mentioned in spaces on, just to say this, I'm playing my foot in the ground. This is who I am really rooting for. Um, because I want some new names in the pot. I don't
Yes.
want to see people that I believe are really talented struggle their whole life and then maybe be celebrated after they're gone of how needle pushing or how like imagination and imaginary their works are and how progressive their works were after the fact. I would rather do my part as much as I can.
Yes, that's great. So important. Yeah. And how do you see, now that you've been collecting for a few years, how do you see this evolving for you? What are your goals? Like, do you have a vision of where it could go or where you would like to contribute? Do you see traveling more internationally, focusing more on, as you said, your local community, or building more bridges with other collectors? What would be giving you more joy in this particular vocation?
Um, I think the for me the if I do get some kind of, I guess, social raise, which I mean, since worked in fashion, I don't really fall for the like the smoke and mirrors of that. But if it can mean like I can help some of the younger artists, get more eyes on them, get find at least find a community that appreciates their voice, because it might not even be Atlanta. Just like I buy people that are not in Atlanta, somebody that's not in Atlanta might buy them, just to help broaden that, which I hope also the art fair helps broaden,
Yes.
like
What
the
is your art
eyes.
fair? It's coming up, right?
It's, I believe, October 3rd through 6th, if I'm not mistaken. The
Okay.
first, pretty much the first week in October. Um, I'm hoping during that time, which also some of their VIPs and stuff will be doing the tour.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but hopefully being able to say, hey, this person's based here in Atlanta. This person's based here in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
and really show that, there are people that's doing exceptional work in Atlanta. Now, will I say it's a lot of them? Uh, Probably not, in my opinion. It's a rarity. I feel like people that are doing things at a high level, it's not commonplace. So, in any market. So, just to say that yes, we do have people that are doing work at a very high level. They just maybe don't know the way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it is very much who you know, or who you're showing with, and they don't understand it from that context.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they didn't go to school for art, maybe they're self-taught,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe they just haven't accessed that. Maybe they're mentored with someone in a different space than I guess they're appealing or trying to, end up at, and then they have to really push themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no clue what the future holds, for collecting, but I would like to eventually, have some of these people on exhibit somewhere. Um, but also sometimes time is a matter of it. So if it's 5 years or 10 years, um, I just want to, continue to support the people that are pushing the needle forward.
Yes, that's exciting. Yeah, it's hard to predict. I agree. Sometimes I've seen working with art collectors for 20 years. I've seen people going through all different curves. Some start very aggressively and then slow down. Some start slowly and get more aggressive, or some kind of steady and they have a budget set aside, for every year a little bit, and they usually do quite well, I have to say. I mean, those who are very methodical about it,
Yes.
maybe slow, but slowly but surely. I think for me, most exciting to see when people start small, when I work, with my collectors, and see how they evolve, how the education process goes, then when I travel with them, I think their world expands and they can see kind of the bigger circuit, and then they can look and kind of appreciate their own collections more. I think that the growth
Mm.
for me as an advisor and curator is really what's most exciting. And the connections they make, I think, often so uplifting. It really changes people. As you've seen, you probably become much more of a giving person, opening, sharing with others. Um, yeah, art is an interesting platform for people. How would you define it? What happens when you find people through art? What kind of conversation does it allow you to have? Would you ever
Wow.
come across people who are there because of the art, or maybe you
Yes.
never meet them?
So one, my grandmother was a quilter, but I through art, because the her friend, which is also a quilter,
Uh-huh.
collected the same artists that I collected, and that's how we came to know each other. Even though this quilter knows my dad, all of his siblings, she's like, yeah, I know your whole family. But me being maybe 50 years, 40, 50 years younger, like I hadn't had that personal connection, relationship, conversation with her. And so I was like, oh, I think you still, I reached out to her. I was like, I think you shown with my grandmother. And she confirmed it. And yeah, because my grandmother's passed, but
Oh,
like
I'm
those
sorry.
types of things, um, bridging the gap, one from people that are collecting this younger than me or people
Mhm.
that's older than me. Um, Maybe they're sharing wisdom with me, I'm sharing wisdom with people that are younger, or even
Yeah.
trying to help each other find the lane, or even framing tips. I'm like, oh, y'all, if you bring your small works when you go to Brazil, it pays for
Yeah.
your Brazil trip. Like those, those types of
That's
things.
great. I love that. Yeah, and
So,
Brazil is a tough market. I mean, it's very hard to, well, the tax situation with Brazil is very difficult. So it's good to have good friends who can help
mhm.
you out.
Yes, I just
Yeah.
shared one of my movers, like when I buy larger or heavier items, I use a moving company and someone was talking about I guess how much it costs for their shipment. I'm like, hey, if it's on the East Coast, you can use this moving company. So it's just
Great.
that on the very, I guess, surface level thing, trying to be helpful. Because I know with buying the art, framing the art, transporting the art, like sometimes it does become daunting on collectors the way of the cost. I'm like, if I can tell you, okay, let me let you use my shipper, maybe it'll save you a few $100. Like it makes it less. And they
Sure.
didn't even ask. They just said, hey, just so y'all know, this is the expenses that go into collecting. I'm like, well, let me show you like my people. I've used them 4 times. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great. So, yeah, so you'd say like you meet a lot of interesting people. I think to me, art is like a really incredible language that I think, you can have cultural differences come from really kind of completely different background and you might never cross paths. But I think if you speak art, to each other, I think it really eliminates all those differences, and
Hmm.
I think brings you very close. I think that to me, I found most profound power because when I think about art, I think we communicate really what we bring in into our presence and is this highest vibration of a human soul, because I mean art does not appear from the mundane state of being. It is created in the elevated state of human creativity, and hence when you have it in front of you every day and you communicate with it, I think it really, this, the field of it, you both affect each other. So I think, that's the privilege of living with art. So to me, I behind me is a beautiful work by a German artist, Caroline Kropf, and she's based in Frankfurt. But I curated a show for her in Dubai, and that's a work from that show. So every day I'm in its presence, and it's interesting. Every day the dialogue is different.
Yes.
Sometimes you notice it, and then you're like, it's a huge painting. It's quite large. It's like 6 or 7 feet, I think. Yeah. So, but it can be so calm, while the size
Hmm.
is so overwhelming. And it always makes me think of this beautiful artist and her presence, and the work she's done. So I find that this interesting way of communicating with the art is so powerful, and it changes. Like we change, and our dialogue and how it helps us changes. So it's really, really beautiful. Yeah, and I'm curious on your tours, do you give, so you said you give all your tours yourself? People come to home, so strangers come, so you're welcoming anybody?
No,
Or how
not
does it,
anybody.
because it's a private residence, so I was curious, how do you do those things?
Um, Everybody that's come to the tour, even if so they might bring their a friend of them, but as far as because I only do 2 to 3 people at a time.
Oh, okay,
Um,
so it's very
Everybody
small.
that's come to the
Mm,
tour to some level, I know of them or someone that I know knows of them.
okay.
Um, so up until now, it hasn't been people at random. I don't think I'll ever get to that point that I'm like, oh yeah, just come see what I have in my house.
Well, I
But
was just curious, I was just so 2 to 3 people, and how long does the tour take usually for you? I mean,
um,
because that's a big, emotional output, also sharing that information.
it takes, I want to say, if it's like not as much conversation and not as much questions, it
Hmm.
takes about 2 hours to tour everything. But sometimes I would say it doesn't go. I wouldn't say it's gone over 3 hours. I might be remiss, but for saying that, but I would say it stays around the 2 hour mark.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like I'm just like go at your leisure. If I miss something, you can ask about it. If you feel like you want to
Yeah.
know about this, if not, we'll continue to the next room. Or if you want to pause and talk about it, and you can say I don't like this, or you can say I really like this.
So
I
that's
mean,
allowed.
it's okay for you to be honest about it because it's you not going to live with it. I'm going to live with it. So
Yeah.
if it's not for you, I think that I kind of want that veil of,
Hmm.
oh, I just need to say I love everything to be out because I personally don't care because it's in my house, so I love
Yeah.
it. But if it provides conversation, because maybe the next person, well, the person right next to you, which may be someone you know or not know, they may feel something different, and then they can also say what they feel regarding the piece. So
Yeah.
I'm 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 just like we can go at whatever pace. Um, because I it's mostly the weekends that I do the tour, so there's not the business aspect that I need to run and you know do something with the models. So since it's the weekend, I can just take my time.
Yeah. That's great. Do you have any tips for collectors who are starting to collect? Um,
Hmm.
so that's yeah, I want to get some advice from you for people like venturing. Maybe for people you folks in Atlanta, so maybe you have some cool tips to share. And then for our wider audiences, abroad, and I mean in LA, because I think it's always encouraging to hear from another person who started recently. It's not intimidating, it's doable, it's integrated in your life. You haven't done anything out of like crazy. You just followed, you added a dimension, but
Mhm.
along the same kind of life outlets.
So I would say my advice, which just is from a trial and error, is not even advice that I went by, but I would say definitely spend the time visiting the museums, the fairs. If you
Hmm.
can't do the museums and fairs, buy art books or even YouTube documentaries to really familiarize yourself with a complex array of art so you can understand what kind of moves you. I
Yeah.
got to the point that I now have a folder of my favorites, like my favorite encounters with art. It could be at the armory, it could be at a
Hmm.
museum, it could be at a studio visit. But which ones are my favorites, and I have to what from the abstract works makes me feel this because I know that I personally I don't like abstract for the sake of liking it. I
Hmm.
like specific abstracts or specific types of things I can see in a work versus someone telling me why I should like it or what I should feel from it. Um, with sculpture, same thing. I don't want to just buy someone because they're a sculptor and I'm looking for a sculpture. I
Hmm.
I want to know why things tug at me from different museums or different experiences I've had. So that I learned later on. I was just not going off of it was going off of intuition. I wouldn't say it's just flying off the edge, but I was like, okay, I like this. And then I was like, okay, now I want a quilt in the collection. So then I would or a textile and I would go wait until I find somebody, but it wasn't necessarily comparing it with anything or understanding that maybe the artist isn't all the way there at their practice.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I bought some great textile works, but somebody that would be rushing just to add, oh, let me get a textile piece.
I
They
understand.
won't be.
Yeah.
They're just like rushing into the medium instead of like knowing
Giving
if
it
it's the art
time.
that they really love.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. So basically keeping kind of your notes, together so you can come and, consult with them as you progress. Yeah, I think it's a nice dialogue with yourself. That's true. So you can always kind of connect the dots. Yes, I think that's great. What about funding the exhibitions with a low budget for young collectors?
To find them, the ones
Well,
that.
for a lot of people when they're young, they want to collect. I think where I come in often that my role is like I tell people, you don't have to be wealthy to start collecting art. So I remove the intimidation from the subject. I
Mhm.
really tell the people that they can become very successful collectors, that they just have to, see more art. That I inform them, my role is to inform what they can access at their stage of life and what's affordable and what has distinctive potential for them, what they're looking for. But for you, like with the friends you have in Atlanta, maybe you want to see them start collecting, and not everyone has maybe consistent business or something else. What tips would you tell them for low budget? Would you turn to certain medium? Would you tell them work with friends? What is your tip?
So I would say my advice for people that are starting on the lower budget,
Yes.
um, one, support the universities, even the high schools. So student artists coming up from the high schools or universities, both in bachelor's and master's
Mm-hmm.
programs, go to their open studios, go to their thesis, go to those things where you can kind of see, okay, what do I like, but also what's the price point. Once you've established there's a certain artist that you do like that you collected from, oftentimes, to some extent, birds of a feather flock together. So
Mm-hmm.
people that may be more surrealistic in their minds, that they might have other friends that also are as exploratory. So I have never asked for suggestions from that artist who their friends are, but sometimes on their Instagram they'll post people that either are their friends or they really like their work, and that's how I get introduced to another artist. So there's
Yeah.
been a lot of situations where I bought an artist and then that artist leads to a different purchase from another artist, and it was just from them sharing them on their Instagram. So I follow closely with I guess with the community that I'm interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Um Also, a lot of these arts foundations and different entities have benefit fundraisers. So they might have an auction of artists to benefit a museum fund or even like a initiative with the youth. So there are like many ways to get in with collecting, and you can buy pieces maybe as low as, well, under 500, or you could buy pieces as high. Like, it's really like, don't be afraid by saying everything's $10,000.
I
Um,
agree. I agree. I think you said it, I think people often just don't think it's possible to find something, a original piece of art under $500. But I always tell them there's all sorts of art. And I think it's fantastic advice that you're giving about turning to schools, local schools, supporting people in your community who might be high school students or might be, in your local university, in your local museum, maybe not necessarily with a big name. So I think that's the way to go because everyone needs support. I think support is crucial for the art community at all level. I mean, whether
mhm,
among artists, whether among collectors, among museums, there's a lot of struggling museums. I always tell people, don't necessarily go and support that same museum everyone knows about in LA. And I'm not going to drop any names, we all know them. Well, find something else, like join the other group because everyone needs, it has to be spread, the love and support.
mhm,
Not only MoMA in New York has to get the funding, like their bequest pages, I think like over 100 pages long. It's kind of sad actually. Makes me concerned. So I think it has to be a little bit more evenly distributed. We have to
mhm,
understand that schools need funding, little universities, experimental spaces, artist-led centers are very important. I always encourage artists, if they can show their art, start yourself. Do something, host something yourself for the other artists,
mhm,
and then there is more traction. And I think that's beautiful, and I've seen beautiful examples of it worldwide. Yeah, no, it's really fantastic conversation. Yeah, so